Everyone is talking about the reigning champions getting bounced before the real dancing even starts. Spain, the program that turned consistency into an art form, is out in the group stage, and the surface-level take writes itself. They shot poorly. They ran into a buzzsaw with a generational superstar across from them, and sometimes the basketball gods just say no. That's the headline you've seen 1,000 times. But it leaves out the truth that actually explains how a nation this organized, this ruthless about details, ends up packing bags in early September. This isn't just about missed free throws or a cold third quarter. This is a story about a handover happening in plain sight, a federation accepting short-term pain, and a coaching era ending at the exact moment the team needed its old identity most. Today, we're going to walk you through the choices that set this result in motion, the players who were on the floor when it mattered, the absence that defined the late-game offense, and the power transition that made this the most volatile Spain we've seen in decades. If you came for a recap, you'll get it. If you stayed for receipts, you're getting those too. And by the time we're done, upset won't feel like the right word. Changing of the guard will. Let's start with what you saw at the end of the deciding game. Two 19-year-olds finishing a must-win versus a contender, wearing Spain across their chest and not flinching. On paper, that's brave coaching. In reality, it's philosophy made visible. Spain's success across the last 15 years has been the ability to evolve without melting its core identity, unselfish structure at both ends, reliable guard play under pressure, and veterans who understood the situational math better than anyone. This time, when the floor shrank and possessions grew teeth, Spain leaned into youth and development. That's not a panic move. That's a choice. You don't accidentally close an elimination game with teenagers unless you've decided that getting them those live reps is part of something bigger than a single tournament. When the pace staggered and the game turned into a half-court stare-down, the young guards chased the right reads, accepted the physicality, and kept the ball moving to advantages. And even when the results swung the wrong way, the message was unmistakable. The federation and the staff were willing to spend tournament equity to buy experience for the next cycle. That tells you more about Spain's internal calculus than any shot chart ever could. The irony is that those kids did a lot right. The problem was the gaps around them were too big to paper over in 40 minutes, and no culture, not even Spain's, can replace scar tissue on command. But if the youth surge is the visible part of a story, the invisible part, the one that flips this from bad tournament to historic hinge, is the end of an era on the bench. Spain didn't just lose a game, it exited a dynasty of habits built by a coach who made winning feel routine. The ripple effects of a leadership change are never clean, and Spain felt that turbulence at the worst possible time. When you know a transition is here, not in theory, but in contract ink and goodbye pressers, everything tightens. Rotations shrink differently. Trust is negotiated in real time. Veterans scan for signals, prospects push for minutes, and every timeout comes with an extra layer of subtext. That's how power shifts work. It doesn't mean anyone quit. It means that the old certainty, the part where Spain could call the same out-of-timeout staple and get the same spacing discipline and late-clock poise, wasn't guaranteed anymore. This is where expectations and reality part ways. Expectation. The champion's muscle memory will carry them through a messy group because it always has. Reality. When the voice of the era is taking a final bow and the next chapter is already peeking through the curtain, the margins that used to belong to Spain get contested. You could feel it in the way they tried to toggle between old packages and new freedoms, in the way the defense veered from pristine show-and-recover sequences to scrambling rotations one pass late. Even the emotional tone was different. Spain still competed, they always do, but the clinical edge, that calm blade honed over 15 years, dulled at the exact moment the bracket demanded it be sharp. That's an era ending in real time. Now we get to the roster choice that turned tight fourth quarters into coin flips, the missing late-game organizer. Spain's best versions always featured a guard who could put a hand on the game's pulse and slow it to their preferred beat. Not a volume scorer necessarily, but a pressure valve. In this tournament, that role was a revolving door and not by design. When your naturalized point guard, a player who has anchored your crunch time structure in recent cycles, is unavailable, everyone else's responsibilities get heavier. Wings have to create 2 dribbles deeper than they want to. Bigs have to seal earlier and hold position longer. Young ball handlers are asked to balance tempo and risk, while also surviving on-ball pressure from elite defenders who can smell their inexperience. You saw it in the endgame reads. Spain sets got the first action but not the reset. The ball found the paint but didn't always invert back out on time. The catch-and-shoots arrived a beat later than they do when a true quarterback is steering traffic. None of this is about pointing fingers. It's about understanding how one absence reshaped Spain's late clock identity. The best programs can survive shooting slumps. What they can't fake is a voice that tells everyone where the next advantage is coming from. For years, Spain could summon that in their sleep. This time, the role was an open audition, and elimination games aren't where auditions usually end well. And then there's the detail that the box score turns into a headline, the kind of unforgiving shooting variant Spain has usually protected itself against. Yes, they missed free throws they normally make. Yes, the opponent hit timely threes with a confidence that piled scoreboard pressure on every Spain trip. But if you only see that, you miss the chess. Spain's defense has always been built on squeezing your pet actions until you settle for Plan C. That requires two things: pristine communication and the physical freshness to make second and third efforts without fouling. During this group stage, the communication wasn't bad, it was merely human, and the legs weren't as fresh as their habits require. You could see it when a weak side tag was a half step later than the scouting report demands, or when the late switch that normally resets a possession instead created a mismatch the opponent hunted. Free throw variance is random across one night, giving up the exact catch-and-shoot window a team wants as structural. Spain prides itself on erasing those windows. In this tournament, enough of them appear to crack the door every game. And when you're playing elimination basketball before the bracket even starts, that door doesn't need to be wide, it just needs to be open. Spain pushed it shut a few times. It kept swinging back. Zoom out, and the shock of Spain's early exit isn't just about their name. It's about what their presence has done to every bracket for 2 decades. Spain is the gravitational center that bends matchups around it. Knock them out early, and the bracket doesn't just get easier, it gets weird. A path that was supposed to run through a champion now runs through teams that have scars of a different kind. Underdogs who suddenly see daylight, giants who feel a little less inevitable. You saw it immediately. Contenders recalibrated their rotations to chase seeding that avoided Spain later. Coaches gambled on form players because the one more solid game logic replaced the we'll need X in the quarters logic. That's a psychological earthquake. Suddenly Greece isn't just hot, it's credible as a title favorite. France's length stops being hypothetical and starts feeling like a parade route. Lithuania's discipline looks less like a nice trait and more like a championship spine. And the second-tier predators, the Turkeys and Polands of the world on a surge, start believing they can stay on the court with anyone for 40 minutes. That's the ecology shift Spain's exit creates. Without the usual predator in the water, everybody's food chain math changes, and tournaments decided by inches start feeling like they're decided by mood. Let's return to Spain, because this is where the reality gets sharper than any upset headline. For most nations, a group stage exit after winning the previous title would be seen as an accident. For Spain, it's a fork in the road they took on purpose. They could have clung to the old script. Ride vets, trim the rotation to the safe names, run the hitting percentage plays, and hope your culture closes the gaps. Instead, they made it the kids' team in the moments that define scars, roll the dice on internal growth, and let the present take the bruise that might pay off next cycle. That's not comfort-seeking. That's risk with intent. And it pairs with a coaching transition, not by coincidence but by design. The outgoing boss gets to hand the keys to a room that has already learned how hard this is, while the incoming voice inherits a group that's already taken the worst press of their careers and survived it. If you're building a locker room that can travel, you can do worse than a generation whose first lesson was heartbreak with responsibility attached. Spain, of all programs, understands that competitive adulthood is a muscle. They just chose to overload it on day one. Does that absolve them of the tactical failures? No. The tape still shows late clock possessions that felt like searches instead of statements. It still shows defensive rotations that guessed instead of dictating. But it reframes them. Those aren't symptoms of a decaying empire. They're the growing pains of a remodel that started before the demolition crew even showed up. The question now isn't what happened to Spain. It's how fast does this experience harden? The veterans will reset, the teenagers will come back with 5 pounds of strength and a cheat sheet of counters, and the next cycle will look nothing like this one by design. That's the reality behind the shock. It also explains why, even in defeat, Spain still behaved like Spain. Calm messaging, no public finger-pointing, clear praise for the kids, and an immediate pivot to the future. That's institutional maturity. And that, more than any single shot, is why this program keeps returning to the top even after nights like this. So what does it mean for the rest of the field right now? It means the title feels available in a way it hasn't in years. Teams that used to measure themselves against Spain's baseline now have to define themselves without that ruler. Greece carries not just momentum, but the confidence that comes from beating the champion. France gets to weaponize its length without the specter of Spain's execution punishing every mistake. Slovenia, Lithuania, Germany, every one of them can sell a locker room story that ends in confetti, and it won't sound like fantasy. The effect on coaching is real too. Risk tolerance spikes. If the longtime favorite is out, there's room to bet on form. Give a streak shooter 2 extra minutes. Ride the big who's running hot. Try the zone you've been hiding. In a Spain bracket, you never waste a possession. In this bracket, you hunt swings. That shift alone could produce another upset before we're done here. In the end, the expectation was that Spain would solve the group like they always do, because champions don't lose in September. The reality is that champions can choose which battles matter more. Spain just chose, consciously or not, to spend the tournament learning who they are next. It cost them a chance to defend the crown, and it detonated the bracket in the process. But if you know how this program works, you also know what comes after. The kids who finish those minutes will be back. Tempered. The new voice on the sideline will be speaking to a room that already understands what standard means because they failed to meet it in public. And the rest of Europe just got a reminder that dynasties don't disappear, they retool. Spain blinked first. But the next time you see them, don't be surprised if it's with the same old look in their eyes. That's the part of the story that never changes.